Today's topic is Supra. Which Supra? Not this one, not this one, but the new one. We are going to talk about the new 2020 Supra and how many of them are available on insurance auto auctions. Today, we'll find out exactly that. As some of you may remember, the first ever 2020 Supra to ever be sold to the general public sold for 2.1 million big ones at Barrett-Jackson auctions, which is just unbelievable. And I think it set the world record for the most expensive Japanese car ever sold. And so now we are looking at kind of the back end of that being what are the cheapest Toyota Supras that money can buy right now. I know there's a lot of other YouTubers that have pondered the idea of buying a Supra from auctions, and I realized that no one's really ever done a video on how many new 2020 Supras are currently at auction right now, and so that is a gap that I'm going to cover right now. So now we begin our search for the Toyota Supras on insurance auto auctions. It's just the most generic auto auctions place apart from Copart. It's where I got my Audi, which I have updates for you guys very soon on how that is. But today we will talk Supra, as I said, and we will discuss this one in particular right here to start. This is, most all of them are launch editions still because they're so darn new. This one has 1,855 miles, left side collision from North Carolina. As you can see, that is a lot of damage. The whole hood is its own piece that kind of consists of the fender as well. So that's a very big piece to replace. And as for parts availability, I have no idea how that is just because the car is so darn new. But most of it, if not all of the underneath side components, are based on a Z4. So we can only hope that all of those parts will be transferable. But as I said, this thing only has 1,800 miles before it met its fate with some sort of immovable object that caused it to become totaled. This particular one also has a missing joint down there and a whole section for the caliper, it seems, and all that stuff. So lots of suspension damage. Even though it says it's a run and drive, I really doubt that it can drive on that. I'm just hypothesizing here. It probably needs a lot of suspension work. But this is just one of several Supras that are incredibly low mileage, purely just down to how new they are. Let's move on now to the second one, which is here. This is a theft recovery vehicle, and as you can see, unfortunately, this one's a lot more mangled up overall. It looks as though just every single panel on this car was messed up in some way, shape, or form. This one's from San Antonio, Texas. It's a rollover, and it says the loss is theft and the primary damage is rollover, and it is just so far gone. There is just no saving this car. If you wanted to try and pull the motor out of it and use it for something like that, or use some interior bits for your own pleasure, I suppose, but even down to the wheels are just bent and gone, and there's just not a lot you can even do to try and save this car. Which is sad because this car probably is in the same kind of realm of mileage as the other one that we saw. 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles, maybe if you're like one of the very first people to have one delivered and you drive 1,000 miles a month, 5,000 miles as a max. But it's an inoperable dashboard, which just means that you can't pull the mileage off of it. So we don't really know, but presumably just because this car is so new, there is just so low mileage, and just to see it crumpled like a candy wrapper is just so unfortunate to see. Then the next car that we will be looking over is this one right here. This is another one. This one is from California. This looks a lot more manageable compared to the last one that we just saw. This one only has 609 miles, as if, 5 to 1,000 miles makes a difference. This one has some rear quarter damage, which can be expensive to repair just because it's pure laborious bodywork and Bondo, unless you wanted to try and somehow find a new Supra quarter panel. And it also appears as though it has some roof damage, which generally, for me, looking at cars from auction is generally a pass. Like, I would not buy it because that can start messing with the structural integrity of the car. The Audi I bought from auction, there was nothing structurally unintegral about it. It was purely cosmetic things that needed to be repaired. This one is a lot better condition than the last one that we just saw, and it's in this really beautiful looking silver which I don't think I've ever seen on a Supra before. This one, I mean, from this angle here, appears to be a lot better. It's a run and drive car, which is a lot more believable in this state as opposed to the other ones that we've seen. And it's just a lot cleaner car with no deployed airbags. It's in very clean, nice shape apart from this rear quarter here. Needs a taillight, rear bumper, and some rear quarter work along with a little bit of trunk work. I think you don't need to replace the trunk, it can just be bog noted out. And then probably some clips, possibly in alignment, actually probably in alignment. And then some roof work, which I would be a little bit hesitant about doing. But if you're looking at this car and you have a lot of experience around that sort of thing, like Goon Squad or any of those guys, and you're confident and you've done this sort of thing in the past, then by all means go for it. And it also seems as though there's a little bit of front end damage here as well. But aside from that, and possibly it looks like a cracked headlight, this is a pretty good candidate for a rebuild project. For any particular YouTubers, put them down in the comments, mention them. I would be honored to see any sort of mainstream or even non-mainstream YouTuber pick up a Supra and rebuild it based off of a recommendation from here. And that would just be fantastic. The whole goal of this, of course, is to be informative and to try and just analyze it from my perspective. And this car seems to be a pretty decent contender for a relatively simple project, aside from the roof. And if it just purely depends on if you're willing to work with that sort of thing or not. And aside from that, those are the only 3 Supras on IAAI, and now we will swiftly move on to Copart. And unlike IAAI, we actually have one car or a couple cars that have a current bid on them, meaning that they're up on the block and being in the process of trying to be sold. And the one in particular that stands out to me is this here 2020 Supra from Chicago that is up with a current bid of $14,400 in this really nice blue. And yeah, it's very nice, like satin. Can't tell if that's just because it's dirty or if it's just a vinyl wrap on top. Actually, it is a vinyl wrap. You can look here. It's white underneath here at this door jamb here, and then the rest of the car is blue, highly most likely indicating that this car was white, and it is definitely a white car underneath. Someone decided to wrap it, I think, a very nice blue, but unfortunately that was very short-lived because this car, oh, the turbo badge. I don't know, man. I don't know what to think of that. Is it good? Is it bad? I mean, the motor, where's the motor? That looks pretty stock. I don't know if it deserves a turbo badge. I don't know. But anyway, regardless, this car is available in Chicago with the price of $14,400. And as you can see, this car seems to have quite a bit of damage to the side and the door jamb and the door sill, which is another structurally integral part of the car. Again, not something I would be particularly eager to tackle, but for someone that's more experienced, then by all means go for it. But this is something for me that I would probably pass on if I was in the position to try and buy one, purely because, as I've said again and again and again, cars with structural problems aren't really the safest bet for resale value, for just your own safety. The car is always going to have the best structural integrity out of the factory. I really doubt any shop that would be working with a rebuilt car would have the capability or the resources to try and make a car 110% as it was from the factory in terms of its structural integrity. And that's just something that I'm not willing to risk in purchasing a car. 3,000 miles. This is the highest mileage one that we've yet to see so far. And it is a run and drive car. And yeah, I mean, the airbags are deployed on the right side, but other than that, it is a relatively clean car with maybe some glass in the back. Again, this is all up to interpretation as to whether this would be something that you would be interested in doing or not. But this is another 2020 Supra. And so the next Supra that we are going to have a look at comes from the California area. This one has a lot of rear end damage And the mileage on this particular one, yeah, there's no mileage on this particular car. This one, as you can see, has a lot of rear quarter damage, and from the looks of it, it's just so crumpled up to the point where there's just so much structural damage where I would definitely pass on it. All of these cars are just super screwed up. Like, I'm actually genuinely surprised by like the amount of carnage that's coming from the Supras. Like, I haven't found a single one yet where I would personally, you know, try and repair it myself, just because it's all of them are just so far gone. As you can see, the interior, there's no airbags that are set off. That's always a bonus. The interior overall looks pretty clean. Oh, I take that back. There is the curtain airbags on the side that are set off, but from the seams of it, it better be, based off of how badly this guy yeeted himself into some sort of immovable object. It does seem to start. It says on the listing that it starts, and there's also a little bit of front end damage. It looks like the headlight is broken, and there's probably some front end bumper damage with that. You can see there's a scuff on the hood, and then the wheel is also really chipped up. It doesn't even seem as if there's a tire there, and then there's some more hood damage you can see right there. That's just a whole new hood right there, and then a possibly fender on the side. This is also a very, very clapped out example, and this kind of ties back into what I was talking about before, where the first Supra sold for $2.1 million, and this launch edition car is just in such a devastating, like, poor state, and it's just so sad to see. This one, okay, this one does have an odometer reading on it, despite the listing saying otherwise. This has 3,801 miles, very low mileage car. I mean, it's higher mileage for a Supra, but just as general speaking terms, it's just so unfortunate to see a car so new in a terrible state. This is beyond my pay grade to try and repair something like this, but as I've said it again and again and again, I would love to see someone in the YouTube community pick one of these up and try and repair it. Alright, swiftly moving on to the next car, we are going to have a peek at this red one here from Reno, Nevada. This one has the side airbag deployed. It's a right-hand side collision with 276 miles before this car hit some sort of an immovable object, which is just so unfortunate. You can see there's some suspension damage. This wheel here is turned, and then this one is not. There's something going on up front. He hit something up front there, and then the side is obviously just super clapped out. The door is just a candy wrapper at this point. It appears as though there's some fender damage and then probably some door sill damage as well. I'd have to have a look at this car in person, but despite all of that, it seems like a fairly straightforward car, provided that there's no structural damage in the door sill, which I would give it a coin toss chance that there is, just based off of the photos here that aren't the best, and the suspension damage, which is relatively easy to fix, but for me personally, I would probably pass on. There's just some small cosmetic bits in the front that got hit. It probably went over a curb or something like that and then hit something else. Aside from that side curtain airbag, or two side curtain airbags rather, and some glass down in the seats, the interior seems to be pretty straightforward. There's nothing like really gory in there or anything like that. This is a more straightforward car, I suppose, compared, you see, all these cars are becoming more and more relative because they're just so messed up compared to other cars that I would even consider looking at. But this does appear to be a fairly straightforward car. The engine starts apparently, and it seems as though everything is okay. The hood is a little bit misaligned due to something, I'm not sure what, but otherwise, fairly straightforward car for someone in the Reno, Nevada area, and this seems to be a decent contender for a good car. Next up, we will have a look at this one here. Is there two Reno cars? There is two Reno, Nevada cars. You guys like your red Supras really clapped out, don't you? Okay. So this one, obviously, no front bumper, probably implying this right taillight has maybe damage, maybe not. Very hard to tell from the photos. This one beat the other one in lowest mileage competition. This one only has 121 miles. This car didn't even go through a full tank of gas before being destroyed and sent to auction, which is just the most devastating thing to think about if you think about it like that. This one There's no front end. There's probably a lot of different clips and stuff like that for the headlight and the whole bumper assembly that are missing. Again, some more suspension damage. The left wheel, like the other car, the other red car, is turned, and then this one isn't, implying some suspension damage. And then moving on to this side, there's the missing fender that appears maybe a little nick on the hood from the tire rubbing on it. The back end, apart from some dust, seems to be relatively straightforward. I'm not seeing anything immediate that stands out to me. The trunk, there's probably some spare parts in there. It doesn't seem as though there's any structural damage in the front that I'm immediately just scanning for. This here all seems to be intact structurally. There's probably some suspension damage, but otherwise this is another fairly clean contender. I can't tell if that's an airbag that's set off in there. I'm trying to look for, well, it does look like the airbag has been set off in there on the left side. Otherwise, this is probably one of the cleaner cars. I mean, oh, and it has a current bid of $4,300. So this one probably just went up and is at that price. Yeah, this is a decent contender, another good contender for a rebuild project that is pretty straightforward. As I've said again, this would be such an amazing thing to watch someone take one of these auction cars that already have kind of a scampered, late hampered past, and then just to go all out and then put in like a new 2J motor in it, and just to go all in and then just kind of revive the car and make it like the best that it absolutely can be. And that would be the dream. So me, if I had those resources to buy one of these cars and to put a 2J in it, that would just be stellar. For now, we can just look and admire. And that is it. That is all of the Supras that are currently available on auction as of the 31st of May 2020. And there's just been, I've seen a couple YouTubers that have posted about the idea of buying a wrecked Supra, rebuilding it, and then doing something really special with it. And I would love to see someone do that based off of one of these recommendations, or just even as a whole, just going in and buying, not even from my own video recommendation. That's just a little personal dream of myself, but that is the current market for auction wrecked, insurance totaled, 890 Mk5 2020, whatever you want to call it, Toyota Supras, most of them being launch editions. Let me know if you would like to see more videos of, let's say, the F8 Tributo or the C8 Corvette. I actually looked for those two. Those two aren't currently up. They're just all too new to be available on auction. But let me know what other cars you would like me to find on auction and go through. But with that, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys on the next one.